log in the game, you can just follow along, try to respond to the answer. Right? This game is just to make sure we understand what's being taught and so on. Also, if you get difficulties to log in, you can message me as well. Right, so it looks like banana bread and I would call to oxygen. Oh yeah. So let's start the game. So this is just a brief review on inequality. So let's get started. So we need to write an expression for this. R is less than 20. So using inequality notation. Right, now the correct response would be the first option, as you can see on the screen in red, less than 20. So how do you identify which is the less than? It kind of looks like an L. If you look closely here, you would see it resembles an L. So that would be less than. So let's go on to question number 2. John is at least 25 years old. So let X represent John's age. So how can we write X as an inequality? Right, so the correct response would be the answer in blue. At least means the smallest value John can have in age would be 25 years. So we have X is more than or equal to 25 years. It means at least is the smallest value you begin with. So the smallest value you begin with is 25. This is why you have to include the equality in the symbol, right? So it would not be just less than or more than, right? Now I'll briefly explain this again because it seems to be a little bit confusing at times. So let's go forward again. H is no bigger than 15. So no bigger would mean that what? Is that the smallest value you can take, or is that the biggest value you can take? Right. So the correct response would be H is less than or equal to 15. So when you see the term no bigger than, it means the maximum value you can take is 15. Yes, you include the 15 once you see that sign. So the answer would have been the blue as you see here on the screen. So let's move on. We have question 4 and 5 to continue with. The sum of two numbers, x and y, is less than 5. So take your time with this one. I'm giving you a minute for this. Right, so the sum of two numbers, x and y, is less than 5. So less than would take on the symbol looking like an L. So that would be less than. When we say the sum of two numbers, we really mean add them up. So if it was 2 and 5, we would add 2 and 5. In this case, it's x and y algebra. So x and y, when we add them, would be less than 5. And that would be represented by the red, as you can see there on the screen. So we have one more question. The product of x and y is at most 10. Right, so the correct response would have been the answer in yellow. The product of x and y simply means multiply x and y together. If you multiply two algebraic terms, for example, x and y, we can simply write xy. At most would simply mean the biggest number you can take is 10. So we have to take values that's less than but including 10. So that would be the review. All right, guys. So I know the concept would have been a little bit challenging. So let's actually discuss some of the material now. Right. So what usually is confusing for you guys is the wording, or what does each term mean and so on. So let's do a quick review of that before we go further into this topic. So we have talked about some signs that so far we would have done. Now we are familiar with equality. Equality means the sign or the number on both sides is the same. So for example, 3 would be equal to 3. The both sides of that sign would have the same value or the same weight. Think about equal sign as a scale that has to be balanced. Right? So that would be equality. We are familiar with equality. Now the other sign we'd have learned would have been less than. Right? Or this sign. Now, what is an example where we can use less than? So you can either take this down as notes, or if you want, you can screenshot it, because we'd have talked about this last week already. But just want to get everybody on the same page. So for example, less than. So let's use Henry is less than 10 years. So how would I write this as an algebraic expression? So as an algebraic expression, we would have, let's use Henry as h. H would be less than 10. Right? We cannot include the 10 because the question just simply said less than. So this is an example using less than. Right, now let's use an example with more than. So suppose, so more than or this symbol. Now, it can be confusing to remember the symbols. The easiest way to remember less than, it looks like an L that's tilted. Think about how you write an L. Now, math usually have a lot of words in it, and you should be able to translate the word or the math into words or the words into math, and that tends to give students trouble. So I'm doing another example. So sir is more than 20 years old. So another example. So I would use S for sir in this case, since we are not told which symbol to use, would be more than 20. So watch this sign, right? More than, it did not say or equal to, it simply said more than. Right, so those would be the two things, the two signs which we'd have been familiar with all along from previous knowledge in SCA and so on. Right, so we have more than, we have less than. Right, so I'm giving you a minute. If you want, you can take the screenshot of it. Let me know if you are confused about the symbols so far. Right, I don't want anybody to be confused when we go forward. So what I did is I stated the symbol less than or more than, but I give an example, a worded example. Right, the example is to translate the terms. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do, guys, is type another worded example, and you are going to message me the answer that you think. And so this is two examples, more than, less than. We have two other signs to talk about. Let's do examples using this. So guys, how would we write this in an inequality? So if we want to translate the sentence into math using one of the inequalities we just spoke about, how would we do this? So take a minute, you can message me the answer. So use L to represent Leanne. Right, guys? So I give you guys a minute there to understand what we were talking about. So this is what we were trying to talk about. We have more than or equal to, right? In this case, more than includes the first value you're starting with. So in the example I use here, we have Sir is more than or equal to 27 years. Right, that's the example. I use S to represent Sir, so we would have S is more than or equal to 27. Right, now another way you can see the same thing is saying Sir is at least 27. Right, more than or equal to 27 is the same thing as saying at least 27. All it means is that the smallest age you can start with is 27. So both statements mean the same thing. So this is what I was saying here in the last line. The last line, which you can see here, where we have more than or equal to and at least is the same thing. Right? So we have used the same sign here, more than or equal to. So let's do an example with this understanding now. So I'm going to type the words and you will translate this into an equality. Inequality. So how would we write this as an inequality? Darian is at least 11 years old. So you can message me. So you could use D for Darian.
It will be D. It will be the next way around. The right.
Yes, I know what you're trying to say. Is the right arrow if you want to call it that. But what else? What you have to do to the right arrow to make it correct? Right, so if we were to write this in an inequality, it would be this. Now, in your chat, you might not see the symbol. So that's why you're probably not typing it. So it's supposed to be looking like this. More than or equal to 11. So when we say at least, it means the smallest age Darian can be is 11 years. So this is why we use this sign. Now this is also the same as saying this. So this is like English first again. More than or equal to, right? 11. That would have been the same statement here. So either one of these statements, this is how you would represent the inequality. So before I move forward to the other example, let me make sure you guys understand this. Why did I write this statement? So both statements are equivalent. It means the smallest age Darian can be is 11 years. So you can be 11, 12, 13, 14, I don't know, right? So we're doing that to understand it. Good job, guys. So you can take this as a screenshot if you feel you would forget it, or if you're comfortable, it's fine, right? Just think about the sentence in English. Don't throw away all your maths. Don't throw away all your English knowledge and say, oh, you wouldn't need maths, right? At least it's the same thing as saying more than or equal to. If I say you're at least 5, it means you can be 5 or more. If I say you are more than or equal to 5 years, it means you start with 5 and you go bigger. Good job. So,
excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
You make a mistake with the last in the last line on top. You make a mistake. You put an E instead of a S.
A E instead of a
S.
Oh, okay, no problem. Thanks for telling me. Good job, guys. So let's move forward now and talk about the last inequality, which we would have talked about already. Right? I want to make sure we have a good foundation in this. So we just talk about more than or equal to. We also have less than or equal to, or at most. So those would be two words that are similar. So how would the sign look like? Just like a less than sign, but with an equal sign at the bottom. That's parallel to the arrow. Right? So like a less than sign, so I will draw another one here, but with an equal sign. So let's jump straight away into an example to make sure we confirm understanding. Right, so there are at most 12 students in class. So when you see a statement like this, think English, not math. Not because the word say most in it means you would use the sign more than or equal to. The question says there are at most 12 students in the class. So the biggest number of students you can have in class today would be 12. So what sign would we use? We would use, so I would use S to represent student. The sign we would use is the sign we just learned, which would be less than or equal to 12. Right? There are at most 12 students in class, so we'd use this. Now, what is another way we can write this statement to make it equivalent? We can write it like this. Less than or equal to 12 students in class today. So this is another way you can write the same sentence, right? So both sentences would use the sign less than or equal to. So you can either say there are at most something. So for example, there are at most 12 students in class, or you can use there are less than or equal to 12 students in class today. So this is the fourth inequality. And this is two examples where you have different wordings to mean the same thing. So I'll give you guys a second to copy this, or you can take a screenshot. Remember, this is just a refresher. We've done this already. Right. So guys, let me just confirm your understanding before I go into an example. So let me know if you're confused about this. So this is more or less English. So we just basically saying two statements mean the same thing. Brilliant. Now let's jump into an example today. So I'm going to give you an example, two examples. Let's see if we get this. Right. So there are at most 20 people waiting in KFC today. So use K to represent KFC. So how can we write this in terms of an inequality? The word you're paying attention to is at most 20 people.
Excuse me, sir, you are making me hungry of the
Making you hungry? Oh gosh. Right. So let me know if you guys got this. So we would have K to represent KFC. And since we are saying at most 20 people, so this sentence means 20 is the maximum number of people I can have. So I would have less than or equal to 20. Right? That would be the solution in this case. Now, what is another way we can write this statement? Right? So both statements would translate to mean the same thing. So K represents the number of persons in KFC is less than or equal to 20, meaning it cannot exceed 20. Right? So both statements. Right? So that would be some practice on that. Right, guys. So there is technically a fifth one, but it's a combination. The fifth one would represent between, right? I'll put it in commas. So we can have between. So what do I mean by between? So, okay, let me do an example to illustrate this. So the students in math class are between the ages 12 to 14. So you would have heard the word, you'd have heard this before, between the ages 12 to 14. Right, so how can we represent this as an inequality? Well, between, think about what between does. So 12 would be the lowest point, 14 would be the biggest point. So I would use A to represent the ages of these students. So if I'm talking about, now normally, we can see this statement, 12 to 14. Right, but remember, we are speaking about inequalities. So we want to write inequalities to represent that. So what we will have is this. For any age you have like this, you would always put something like this. So 12 is less than or equal to 8, which is less than or equal to 14. So this is how you would represent between. So if I say the ages of students in a math class are between 12 to 14, and I wanted to write this as an inequality, I would put 12 less than or equal to A less than or equal to 14. And this is the general example you would use. Now, let's confirm this with an example. So let's try another example. So all you need to do is literally change the numbers at the beginning and end and whatever you're representing by. Right, so this will be between. So let's do an example. The temperature is between 23 and 30 degrees. Right, so write an inequality to represent that. So right away, look what is the smallest value. You put that on your left-hand side, which would be 23. 30 would be the biggest temperature we have in the day. We can use T to represent temperature. And we simply write less than or equal to, less than or equal to. And we are done here. So let me just confirm your understanding of this. So this is the last statement in inequalities. So once it's between, that's all you put in. Look for the smallest, look for the biggest. Consider what the variable is in the problem. In this case, it was temperature. And then input your less than or equal. So just one last point about this topic before we confirm, before we go on. Now, usually when they say between, they mean inclusive, right? So between.
Excuse me, sir, you have some more seconds again, or minutes.
Yes, I have about 3 more minutes. So between means inclusive of the endpoints, right? So you would include the 23 and you would include the 30. But sometimes the question can be very specific. So it can be something like not including 23. Right? So suppose the question said the temperature is between 23 and 30 degrees, but you're not including 23. This is how you would write it. All you can simply do is remove the equality, from here. So you take out the equal sign. Right? So if the question had said not including 23, this is how you would write it. So it means the first value you can start with would be 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. You can't include 23. Likewise, the question can say not inclusive of 30. How would we do that? Well, we will remove the equal sign from the 30 this time. So we would get this instead. Right? So sometimes the question is specific about that. But if the question is general, as what we did so far, between 23 and 30 degrees, it means we include the endpoints. Right? So I'll just put a little note here, because these sometimes they come up. So the first example would be not included 23. Second one would be not including 30. Right? So that's sometimes they bring that in exam situation. So we'll launch the code. Let me make sure we got this. So the easiest way to remember this is when they say not including, we will just remove the equal sign from the term. Right, guys, so we have like 2 minutes left, about 1 minute left for class, right? So what we're going to do now, so seeing that we understand all the concepts involved in inequalities, what we're going to do is actually solve problems on them. So just stay with me a minute. Right, so this is just my whiteboard I'm sharing for a few minutes. Right, so I know we're going over time, like by about 2 minutes, but just bear with me. I want to pave the way for the next time we have class. Right, now before in algebra, we'd have been introduced to the idea such as this. So for example, if we had x plus 5 equals to 2, how would we solve that? We would simply subtract 5 from the side. This would give us 2 minus 5. Therefore, we would get x would be equal to minus 3 from algebra. Now, how does inequalities work in the context of this question? You always treat the inequality as though it's an equal sign. So let's try an example here one time. So suppose this was less than 2. This is how we proceed to solve the problem. Pretend that inequality is just an equal sign. So the same operations would hold. So if this is an equal sign, what you would do, you would subtract 5 from both sides or carry over the 5, as sometimes you heard. Sometimes you hear saying, right? This would give you x is less than minus 3. The only time the sign would change here is when you are multiplying or dividing by a negative number. Right, so this is just an introduction to the algebra that we would be doing using inequality. Right, so that is the concept here. This is just a brief introduction. So we move into the algebra part of things now, which can be a little tricky. So I will have to end here today, guys. So we have come to the end of this tutorial. It was a pleasure serving you today. Please take a minute to fill out the quality control questions that would appear at the end of this session. Let us know what you'd like us to do differently and how we can improve to better serve you. Thank you for choosing BetterGradesFast.com. Do have a blessed day, guys. So the next Tuesday we meet, we'll be continuing from this vein. Goodbye.
Excuse me, sir, we'll be continuing it?
Yes, we'll be continuing from here, right here where we left off, with solving problems with inequality.